Um, what I want to talk about now is a guy named Salvatore Minuchin. And Minuchin gave us this great model and way of looking at things that really is useful when we're trying to figure out what's the process by which we can assist a family. So Minuchin was I believe he was a social worker, and I think he worked in, maybe it was Philadelphia or New York, but in the slums of a given area. And it's on me so you know who I am. He was intrigued. I think he was like a school social worker at the time. He was intrigued. He was a psychologist, but he was very intrigued why at a school where the pie for the kids is so similar, that is, they're all in a disadvantaged neighborhood, they're all economically disadvantaged, they all had, single or working class parents that were in tough times. I mean, this was just a tough, impoverished area of the city, and all of the kids went to this school. Why were there kids that did well versus kids that didn't do well? And he said, well, maybe it's because some kids are smarter than other kids, but the IQ stuff didn't support that. If you test the kids, their innate ability to process stuff, and they're all in the normal range. So he said, well, maybe it's got something to do with their home environment, because that's the only difference that these kids have, is they all come from different homes, but they all may live in the same apartment building, same neighborhood, all that kind of stuff. So he studies the families of the kids that do well and the kids that don't do well, and he comes up with these generalizations of his findings, which are the kids who did well, I'll represent by the plus, came from homes that had highly structured roles. People knew who they were in their role and what was expected of them. Here, these were what he called unorganized families or disorganized families. The roles were fluid, meaning one day mama might cook, one day mama may not cook. It's not my job. One day little sister might do that. An understanding of responsibilities are ambiguous.
What was that again?
Understanding of responsibilities is ambiguous. You know what that means? That you don't have a clear, when something's ambiguous, it's like, what does that mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
Spanish. There it is.
Okay. Understanding of responsibility
Or unclear. Was ambiguous.
Are ambiguous. That the understanding of responsibilities is ambiguous, are ambiguous. Whatever I said the first time, it was grammatically correct. Everybody get it?
spell ambiguous.
A-M.
B-I-S.
Ambiguous.
Okay.
Meaning unclear, fuzzy, foggy. All right. So this was an important thing. Now, something important to understand here is that in this household wasn't necessarily mother, father, kids, right? He just said within the system, within the household, roles were structured so that people knew what was expected of them and what they were doing. So this could be grandma, an unrelated kid, and a blood relative kid. Didn't matter. As long as they knew who they were and what they were doing, they tended to function at a higher level than people who didn't know what they were doing or didn't know where. And you see this with kids and with animals, like we train dogs. If you show dogs that there's a boundary that they can run within, they have a blast within the boundary. If you don't let them know what the boundary is, they get kind of anxious because they don't know what's what. Same thing with kids. You give them the rules of something, they operate well within the rules. If you put them in a situation where they don't know what the rules are, they're constantly trying to figure out what are the rules. We do the same thing, but we do it differently. We'll talk about this a lot in practice 3, but you probably remember this practice 3, and when we talk about when people enter into a group, they're trying to figure out what are the rules here? How do I fit in and how do things happen here? And it's always on our mind until we get that issue resolved of, am I included? Am I one of the bunch? And then you're following more with group theory and things like that. So the important thing to remember with Minuchin, structured versus unstructured, organized versus disorganized roles.
Isn't this somewhere on one of our,
Unstructured.
is it in our course thing? Or
I do a whole module on it.
Because I know I read this.
All of this stuff should be familiar to you.
I know this,
Yeah. So,
I don't want to write, I know it's there. Structured and unstructured.
in fact, I even got video of Minuchin talking and
I watched that.
well, it's part of the class, so I'm glad you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, because this is only half the class. The other half of the class is doing these modules and reading it, because it'll help make sense of things I say. And that's why I give it to you a week beforehand, is so when you're walking in here, you're going, oh yeah, that's sort of what I read.
So basically, take notes on the video.
Yeah, if you take notes on the video and then you have questions prepared, then all we're doing is building upon it rather than just covering the basic stuff here. But
I tried to print out your last semester, there was something in there. Like on the videos, like with the YouTube and such, how you can print it to read it.
the transcript
Some of them.
in the videos, yeah, I doubt mine are set that way.
So I tried.
You have me. I'll
I
talk
try
to you
to
all
be
day long.
creative, but it doesn't work.
Okay. So let's get back to remembering the times that we're in. It's like the 60s and 70s. This guy's putting all this stuff out. He's still post-Freudian, right? Which means the foundation of a lot of psychological thought is based upon how Freud originally conceptualized things, or people are reacting to how Freud conceptualized things. So Freud talked about the unconscious drives. Remember what the 3 unconscious drives were? So you id,
Ego. The id, the ego, the super
ego, and superego. What's your id?
Id is the basic needs, or it's wants, and it just wants. And it's like in your younger days, you just, you cry for milk, you cry for attention, you cry for
Impulses.
Right. It's your basic impulses.
impulse.
Right.
That's the word.
So I want to eat. I want to be comfortable. I want to have sex. All those things are unconscious drives which influence our behavior. If you don't have an id that's in check,
It will drive.
you're trouble in society. Why? Because you're just doing everything. You can be a sociopath, right? You don't care about the impact that you have on other people. You're just meeting your own needs all the time. So what Minuchin did, he said, I don't want to make this quite so psychobabble, so Freudian. So what I want to do is I want to talk about this basically as the child that's in all of us. So as an adult, you have some child in you, right? These are your desires and your impulses, but he just calls them child. What's the superego?
Let's see how the best define. It's nothing more than how you mentally operate within the I don't want to say present world, but how how we function with others, other how do you man,
Is it an exaggerated,
no, it's not nothing super about it. Ain't gonna work as simple. I
he
think.
has like a big ego. He has a big
Dang.
ego.
No, that's not it. That kind of ego is not the way you think about it. Superego is like the part of you that worries about the consequences of the id. So this has a lot to do with guilt. If you do this, you're going to hurt somebody. You don't want to hurt anybody, do you? So, it's sort of like the conscience, but it's the part that looks at what the consequences are going to be of something. And it tends to be hypervigilant. It's the part of us that's going, be careful, because your child, when you're inside the store and you're hungry, your id says, open that bag of fries or that bag of pretzels and just start chomping away. Your superego says, if you do that, you're going to go to jail, because that's what happens to bad people if you do those kinds of things.
Okay.
This is very much about boundaries. Your superego provides the boundaries and structure for you to be aware of what your impulses are going to cause you to deal with. Everybody with me? Online, you okay? Give me an amen or something like that. Yeah.
I'm here.
All right. So this is represented by Mnuchin as a parent. Because what's a parent's role? It's to provide boundaries for kids, to provide the discipline that's needed in order to make sure that kids know what are the consequences of what goes on. Now, can you have too much id? Sure. Can you have too much superego? Sure. So what is the ego? The ego is the one that balances the needs of the id and the control needs of the superego. So in other words, it's sort of like the adult in the room. It's the one who says, okay, you know what? The pretzels are there. You're really hungry. Get the pretzels, go pay for them first. Then go over to the little cafe area, you can eat the pretzels, then you can go back and finish your shopping. It helps to problem solve the id and the superego. Everybody following me? So what Mnuchin said is that in every family structure, here's parent, adult, and child, right? He said, everybody in the family system is somewhere on this chart. Either parent, adult, or child, or a little of this, a little of that. But it's because these roles are disorganized for these people that better definition has to happen. So one of the things he talks about is, well, mom has a drinking problem. What do I want her to do? I want her to step up and become more of a parent. The 17-year-old daughter, because of mom's drinking problem, she's the one who's the disciplinarian in the household taking care of everything. Well, I want her to experience a little bit more about what it's like to be a kid right now, to be a 17-year-old, not have to have that responsibility. Dad is checked out. He doesn't want to deal with any of it. He needs to step up and be more of an adult. And the kid, this is his daughter, and the kid who's a 9-year-old is just a 9-year-old, so they may be perfect where they're at. So here's the thing I want you to remember. Mnuchin is interested in where do people need to go in order to get this system in balance to get a better functioning. Right? It's already in balance as a dysfunctioning system. What he wants to know is, if I want to get to that new homeostasis, how do people need to change in the family in order to get there? So this is one way to look at it. So in your paper, on your family, I'm going to ask you, all right, who's the family? What's their presenting problem? Give me a genogram. Give me a level of family functioning. And then I'm going to ask you, give me a structural family analysis. And a structural family analysis is simply you saying, mom's okay. She's an adult, or she's the disciplinarian that she needs. Or mom needs to be more of a parent. But I want you to give me data as to why. This is subjective. This is just your opinion. But the data that you base it on is objective, right? I say this because mom rarely disciplines the children. So she needs to learn disciplinary skills. The daughter needs to be more childlike. Never saw the daughter laugh. Daughter was hyper attentive to the child in the house and also to the parents' needs. You get what I'm saying? Everybody with me? People online, you with me?
Yes, sir.
Chris, are you okay with this?
Bill, what you just covered, this last, what is that called? Structure something?
Structural family theory.
Okay.
And this is all written out in the module too. And it's really cool. It's a great way to think about it. So now I'm walking into a household. I'm seeing level of functioning they're at. I'm knowing what I'm doing. Saying, okay, most of the time, and I hope for all of you guys, the family you're going to pick is going to be level 3. Maybe a little level 2, maybe a little level 4, but mostly level 3. That is problem solving. They need help with figuring out how to do things better. You're gathering your data through a genogram. And then you're starting to look at, okay, what's the system that's organized around the problem? That's our systems theory thinking, right? What's the homeostasis? What's the normal where the problem occurs? So if they say, we argue too much. Well, you want to pay attention and say, okay, well, how does that happen? Okay, we flip on our structural theory cap and we wonder, what are the roles that these people in the family have right now? And we say, just try to identify it with some data. And that's another way of looking at things, right? Notice that's very different than saying what they need to do in order to deal with their problem. What I'm saying is, whatever I have them do, I want to make sure that it's congruent. Congruent meaning consistent with the role I want them to take on. So if I'm going to have mom do something, I might want to help and coach her in being more of a parent as I'm having her do that. With a daughter, I may want to have her engaged in activity that helps her loosen up and relax. This will help guide me in where I want each person to go. Get it? Everybody good with me? Jonathan, you all right? You like it? You love it? You want to marry it? Does it? When you think of your own home, this is what we're going to do in just a minute when I'm done with this. Plenty of time. What have we got till like 6 o'clock?
We got
gotta be over
exactly
there.
5:45.
Exactly.
Exactly 5.
So they said.
Well, I got plenty of time. I'm talking way too fast. Slow down. Okay. I want you to think of your own family growing up and where were people in this? And it doesn't mean that your parents were immature. It just means they were maybe more one way or another. But understanding that the way they were, that influences the system, the homeostasis, and created the system that you have. And all systems have a cost and a benefit. No, there's no perfect system. All right. So if everybody's good with this, I'm going to erase this. All right? All right, here we go.
The ID, ego, super ego, what is happening?
Id.
The
It's the id. I'm telling you, it's not the ID. I'm saying it's the id.
What are, all of that is in the general called the
Conscious drives. Unconscious drives that determine our behavior, or so said Freud.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So, Mnuchin saw that, and then he wondered to himself, Salvatore, how are we going to do that? Now, if you really get into Mnuchin's theories, you'll read a lot about him observing not only people in that parent-adult-child, but he'll start to look at pairs of people, dyads. So you and your brother, together you act like this in the system. You know, mom and the daughter, you act like this in the system. Or the three of you act like this with dad. You know, so what he would start to look at is groupings of behaviors that would create certain kinds of outcomes. And then he'd start to deal with, well, how does this system need to change? How do the roles in that system need to change in order for us to get a better outcome? All right. Well, here's the really cool part of this whole thing, is that Mnuchin gave a process for how you create change as a social worker moving into a family system. Yes. So let's go back to what we knew about social work that we learned from Gen 1, right? We said there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's the exploration phase. There's the implementation phase. And then there is the termination phase. All right? Everybody with me? All of this sound familiar? All right? Now here we've got a system that goes through change, that creates chaos, that creates a new system, if we've got the maintenance and the reinforcement. Everybody following this so far? You guys see online what I'm doing? I'm just drawing out these different processes and theories. So Mnuchin says, in order to be effective as a social worker in creating change for the family, here's what you've got to do. He says, so here's Mnuchin's process, or this is the structural family process. He says, step number one, your job is to observe. What are you observing? The system. You want to see the problem happen in the system so you can know how everybody participates in it. Now, when you watch the Super Nanny episode, and you have to watch the Super Nanny episode for all this to make sense, because I'm going to tell you, the Super Nanny episode lives all this stuff out. The way she observes the system is number one, when she's going to the people's house, she watches a DVD of them. That would be like me giving you the case file. Saying, here's the Orm family, read about the Orm family. So she gets the DVD and says, oh, here's this family. Okay, well, here's the Smith family, I gotta be able to do something with it. So she goes to the house, and when she goes to the house, first thing she says is, don't mind me, I'm just gonna be a fly on the wall, and I wanna watch you all. Right? She says hi to everybody, but she's mostly saying, I just wanna see how you all interact, right? So that's the observe part of the process that Mnuchin talks about. The second piece is he talks about the social worker joining the family. What? Joining the family? How's that? What you do is you become part of the system. You become a trusted part of the family system. Now, does that mean you move in with the family? If you're dedicated and you need a place to stay. But no, he's talking about you develop relationships and rapport with each part of the system so that you have influence in the family system. Okay? In the Super Nanny, you see this happening as she develops individual relationships with everybody in the family, with the kids, with the parents, etc. Everybody follow me? All right. The third thing is you disrupt the system. What? Yes.
Shake it up.
It says it's your job to disrupt the system. Why? Because that's what change is going to create. When you disrupt the system, you create the opportunity for change to occur. Right? So instead of just going along with the status quo, with the homeostasis, our job is to create disruption. When you watch Super Nanny, the way she does this, the last part of her joining thing is she meets with the parents, and she says to the parents, you're lovely parents. She does what's called the sandwich technique. The sandwich technique is, anytime you hear about the sandwich technique, I want you to think of a crap sandwich, all right? Delicious multi-grain bread toasted on the top, crap in the middle, and delicious multi-grain bread on the bottom, perhaps buttered. And that means that when you talk with people, you always start off with the delicious multi-grain bread and say, I love your blouse, and your attitude has been just exemplary. And by the way, your penmanship is unacceptable. And here's what I want to see happen. And then my bottom piece of bread is, and if your penmanship improves, I can see all sorts of beautiful letters coming from you, and you'll be the example of the class, and everything will be wonderful, right? So you acknowledge the person and their value for who they are, and you guys will see this anytime I've given you credit for feedback, usually more intense times, but I'm going to butter it on top to let you know that I actually see who you are, that you're an important person to me, that you're a real human being. I'm going to try to tell it like it is in terms of what the problem and concern is. And then on the bottom, I look forward and say, and if we can do this, here's what we get out of it. Why do I do that? Because that's part of the reinforcement piece, right? Say, if you're able to do this, this will get us this. You'll feel great. You'll feel relieved. You'll feel happy, etc.
Where did you put that MR up there?
Maintenance and reinforcement, because we're moving to a new system. This is the systems theory.
It's the same Mnuchin's version of the old systems.
So 9 times out of 10 on Super Nanny, when you see her disrupting the family system, the way she does that is through, she posts rules and she creates a schedule. All right? So if I create a new rules for your household and I give you a schedule, you got to be up at 7 in the morning every morning, what do you think that's going to create?
Chaos.
A bunch of chaos. Right? Now, normally, after she does this, she goes back to her apartment and says, you guys just follow those rules and the schedule and everything will be fine. And she goes back to her apartment, she watches a video of the family, and she sees they're all going to hell. Why is that? Because they're experiencing the chaos of the change. She goes back and she does the fourth step, which is the realignment. What are they realigning? They're realigning the system. How does she do that? Through maintenance and reinforcement. So when she goes back into the home, you'll hear her say, you were doing an awesome job with that. You got off to a great start, but you didn't do it all the time. You have to do it all the time. And then she'll also point out, now that you've done that, don't you feel great? Have you seen the impact that it has on your daughter when you do that? You know, remember before when little Johnny wouldn't listen to you and you had to grab him to drag him to the corner to listen? Did you notice how when you got down to his eye level and said, Johnny, I don't want you doing that anymore, how he just went with you and did that? Because part of what happens is people tune out when they're effective. Big piece of PCIT, right? That's a huge piece of it. They're trying to train the parents to pay attention to the kids because the kids were actually doing what they wanted and they wouldn't even catch them doing it. And then they'd lose that opportunity to provide reinforcement, which would make the kids want to do it even more. Instead, our natural tendency is to focus in on the negative behavior. So they're trying to teach them to ignore the negative behavior, get them to focus in on the positive behavior and reinforce that. So in the realignment phase, the super nanny goes into the house and says, this stuff's got to be done 100% of the time. Every interaction that you have with this kid when they're screaming and crying, here's what I want you to do. And she does the reinforcement piece. And sometimes that's taking a kid into timeout and showing the kid consistently every time they do it, they're going to be in a timeout. Or more often than not, it's teaching the parents to be able to pay attention to the effect that they're having on the kids. Everybody following me? Kind of cool, right? You know the social work process. So the social work process was basically gathering data, and we do that when we're doing a biopsychosocial biopsychosocial assessment, right? We're trying to pay attention to the client. We're asking them about a wide variety of things. So we're trying to gather all this data. And then in terms of the joining, we're doing rapport building, right? And then we disrupt their system with the plan that we're going to implement. And if we're smart, we're letting them know that this isn't going to be easy. You know, hopefully the outcome is going to be something that they're really going to like. But we should expect that when we implement our plan with the client, it's going to be hard for them for a while. And so during this part of the thing, this is when we're doing our case management. Remember this, practice one, our SOAP notes?
Yes.
Yep. So here is the equivalent of this disruption phase. And then the realignment is when the consistency comes into it, where we have the maintenance and the reinforcement and things are consistently going well. And why is that important? It's important that it functions well on its own because the fifth step is the termination or the exiting of the family system. So, Jonathan, let me ask you, what should we expect if the super nanny is leaving a family system that she's joined?
To expect if she's leaving,
Yes.
then they've reached the outcome that they set up.
Yeah, well, she's part of the new system now.
Chaos.
Exactly. You should anticipate that if you leave that system, just like we anticipate that when we terminate with our client doing individual work, it's going to be a scary time for them. That's why we give them referrals and resources and what ifs. You know, if you start to have problems again, here's what you do. Here are the actions that you take. But our confidence has to be that we've taught the individual in the individual work enough to be able to maintain themselves. So they've now got the critical thinking skills to do problem solving on their own. And in this, our realignment of the family system is one that self-sustains itself when we leave it.
So
Okay?
it's up to them, so it's like a maintenance program after she leaves.
Exactly. So there was a guy last night in the class in Tallahassee that brought this chart that's used at his work, and it talks about the levels of intervention that the social worker does with a client. First one is, I do, you watch. So as a social worker, your functioning level is so low, I do, and you watch me. But then when we get better at it, I do, you help. The next one is, you do, I help. And then the last one is, you do, I watch. You can just sort of see that level of intervention that goes into that. So now with this, also think about Mnuchin's model with the parent-adult-child, right? That when we're doing this disruption of the system, we want to pay attention to the changes that we make are reflective of what the needs are for the parent-adult-child piece. You make me tired just looking at you. Where are you working?
I'll just sort of okay.
All night long?
11 to 7 in the morning.
Wow.
Come visit you during my uneasy nighttime hours.
Copy.
I used to work a job. I used to work at the Child at Risk Hotline, which is the child abuse hotline for Massachusetts. And our shifts were either 3 to 11, 6 to 2, or 11 to 7. And they rotated every week. So we always had different shifts. And then I would ride my bike home through the streets of Boston to get to my home in Cambridge.
Where my niece lives in Cambridge.
Cambridge, very cool place. Best ethnic food in the universe. Where in Cambridge?
Oh, I'm not sure. But I would tell you, watching the PIC videos,
PCIT?
yes, PCIT, sorry. See, I swear that she and her husband are raising their child. They adopted a little boy following the PCIT program. Because I met him for the first time last summer. Yeah.
Well, this is very much, not this, but PCIT is very much cognitive behavioral therapy. It's implementing that with disturbed kids and abusive parents. But it's very much CBT all the way. So it's great training for you guys to get. So we've now taken our systems theory, and we've now taken a theorist who talks about how we as social workers interact with the system. First thing, we collect data about it, we observe it. If we're lucky, we get to watch the problem occur in the system. If we're not lucky, we try to understand how is the system structured so that it allows the problem to happen. Because all of this stuff has pi written around it, you know? Both the people have their strengths and stressors. And if you think about it, a problem has a pie of its own. Not so much strengths and stressors, but to who benefits by having this problem and who has a cost for having this problem. Because if it was easy to get rid of the problem, somebody would have done it. So somebody keeps it in place. And you can think of that in your own lives with, kids that never clean their rooms to habits that are hard to break. There's a benefit to having that problem, and there's a cost to having that problem. So what we're thinking about is, okay, what's the cost benefit in this system of having a problem? How do people participate in it? Then we pay attention to, just like in practice one, rapport with clients is essential. You have to build rapport with everybody in the system. Why? Because we understand that even if I've got an IP, remember what the IP was?
In-person.
Identified patient or identified person. Even if there's a person that brought this family system into treatment, if we understand systems theory, it's not all him, right? It's how everybody interacts with him that's causing that problem. So even if he's doing poorly at school, he might say, I got nothing to do with school. Well, you might. As the mom, if he needs to be able to sit down and do it in a quiet household, then sister's got to turn off her rock and roll music. Brother's got to turn off his sports radio. So does his problem affect everybody? Yes. If I'm smart, as the social worker, I'm engaging everybody in the system, because when I create change, my change is going to be dynamic for everybody in the system. So I might say, Willie, you're really good with your sports radio, and you know the stats. Can you help him with the math a little bit? So I'm getting one child to step up and be sort of an adult or a parent thing. I could say, sister, you're really good at telling him what to do. Can you make sure that at 7 o'clock the house is quiet for him to do that? So all of a sudden, she's moving from her parent role, where she's really good at being bossy, to being a little more of an adult to help with the system. Hey, Mom, you're working really hard, and you're blowing yourself out. You need to just take a bath. When he's doing his homework, why don't you go ahead and take a bath? So Mom, who's trying to keep everything together all the time, needs a little downtime as a child to just relax and enjoy herself. Now, when I go into the system, I ask, well, how's it going with everybody? Oh, he doesn't listen to me when I'm trying to help him do math. Okay, so we problem solve. We try to work that out. How's it going with it? Yeah, we're doing it every night. Are you taking your bath? Well, most of the time, Mom, every night I want you to do something that helps you feel relaxed. It doesn't have to be a bath, but if you want to watch a soap opera, whatever, I just want you to take a break.
Just give her some respite time.
Yeah, if that's what she needs. But here's the important thing with my problem child. I want to make sure that he doesn't feel isolated, that all this stuff's coming down on him. So I want him to have a positive goal too. So while all this is going on, I say, well, what's something like, I want to get into drama at school. Okay, well, maybe Mom could work with you on, reading a script, and doing some drama stuff at home. So everybody's moving forward towards changing. Why? Because here, this inclination is going to be for you to go back to your old roles. So I want you to take your old roles and transform them a little bit according to where I want to see you move in terms of your drives and your role in the household. And hopefully, as I draw attention to, your grades improving, awesome. How's your relationship going? Getting better. Thank you, sister, for being so busy there all the time. And we'll talk about other theories that will enhance all of this stuff. But I want you to see, isn't this cool how everything is overlaying on top of itself? It's not like you're doing either or. What you're doing is you're creating a toolkit of different perspectives in which you can gather information that can inform you as to how to make an effective plan, treatment plan to help out with folks.
It's almost like a literary review.
Yes, collect data from different sources.
And then you just changed, you took Freud's process, changed it and made his own. He developed his own, not changing Freud's process, but developed his own.
Mhm.
And you have a different product. Out of this,
There you go. That's what it's about. Marcus, you got any questions?
No, sir. Well, you said that's going to be in the module because I really can't see it all.
Yes, all of this stuff is written in the module. And what I'm going to ask you in here is to watch a Super Nanny episode, which is right there. In fact, I gave you a whole bunch of different ones you can watch. The Orm family is pretty good in general.
Oh, so that's a real.
And then in the discussion board, I want you to give me one example of their behavior that is an example of one of these stages. So tell me about when you see her observe, or tell me about when you see her join, or tell me about what she does to disrupt. You know, I want you to demonstrate that you understand this theory and you can give me a concrete example from the video to do that.
Either one of the videos.
Yeah, they're all, I put 3 in here just so you can see this is what happens in every episode. She doesn't do the same thing in every episode, but this is what happens. This is the process that things happen in. If you watch Nanny 911, which is a different thing, this is what happens. If you watch Wife Swap,
Yeah, I used to watch that too.
Wife Swap, what are you doing? You're taking a person and you're putting them in another system.
It actually was interesting.
And then you're trying to get a different outcome.
Yeah,
Because what happens? The family wants to go back to being
exactly.
the old
To the
system
norm.
and forcing the new person in it
Mhm.
to be the old mother.
Yes.
And what she does is she complains her way and forces her way. So she creates a new system where they'd have to organize around her role and who she is. Has this been extremely mind-blowing and just wonderful? Can you see why I say this is my favorite class and my favorite topic and my favorite class of all time? Do you see me overjoyed?
What is this?
We have 1 minute, 1 spot. You know, right?
Yeah. Heck, nabbit. Keep. All right. So I'm gonna close, stop the recording.